All right. Good morning, everybody. I'll give a brief introduction here as we wait for additional attendees to join. As we jump into 2024 R1, the new features of Acumatica. I'm John Rosine, a practice manager at SVA Consulting, and I'm joined by Kaylee Hansen, a pre-sale engineer and implementation consultant, Brady Bloomer on the implementation consulting side as well, and Tanya Kreitzer from our client success management side. As we jump into it today, we'll each take a turn going through certain features that are key to 24R1 in a live demo environment. For those of you that haven't joined us previously, we do encourage you to ask questions using the Zoom chat, and you can go ahead and just drop those in at any point in time. Tanya will help manage those questions. If they are related to the content we're covering, we'll do our best to address it in that time. Otherwise, we'll come back to those questions at the Q&A towards the end of today's webinar. And for those of you that have attended previously, welcome back and thank you for joining us again. Brady, do you want to walk us through our agenda? Give us an overview of what we can expect today.
Certainly. All right. So today we'll look to go over what you can expect with upgrading to the newest version of 24R1 in Acumatica. We'll go over the resources and the process that you should expect with the upgrade. We'll highlight in this presentation some of the new features, and then we'll jump into Acumatica to have John, Kaylee, and myself walk you through some of the features in a live demo. We'll wrap it up with a few bullets on some of the integration changes as well with the upgrade, and then we'll send you guys off on the rest of your day here. So with that, in this presentation, we've linked a few of the resources for the upgrade, including the release notes. As a reminder, Acumatica upgrades to a new version twice a year, once in the middle of spring and then the other in the middle of fall. They will periodically put out new build upgrades as well throughout the year, which are smaller. Those resolve bugs in the version, and those will come out every 2 to 8 weeks. As we take a look at the product support lifecycle, I want to point out that Acumatica supports releases that are up to 18 months old. And so the best practice is to upgrade once a year. Try and pick an annual cadence and start to build a routine with the upgrade process. You can see on this diagram, Acumatica will retire support for the 22R2 version on May 30th. In the fall, you can expect the 23R1 version to be retired from support, looking around the end of November there. All right, so let's take a look at what the upgrade process consists of. What steps do we take to get your site upgraded? And so first, we plan the upgrade. We assess, you guys work with us to assess the workload of your team to decide when this fits best in your schedule. This is where an annual routine of an upgrade can really come in handy with helping plan the upgrade process. We'll identify any customizations, workflows, custom reports or GIs that have been created that need to be tested in the new version. Then SVA will get your 90-day sandbox from Acumatica. It's a copy of your production instance in the new version. As I mentioned, you'll have this sandbox for 90 days once it is provisioned. Following the provisioning of your sandbox, we'll go through some tailored training. So based on your processes, your workflow, SVA will conduct trainings geared towards your business based on some of the new features of your upgrade coming from the last version that you're operating on. Then we'll go through piloting and acceptance phase. So we'll execute the testing from what was identified in that planning state. We'll ensure that reports and GIs work as expected. And we'll do some end user training so that the users that are operating the system every day get familiar with what changes are going to occur when we upgrade. Once we get that acceptance, we have the green light on the upgrade, we'll go live with that. So we'll work to get your production site upgraded at a time convenient for your team. It's important to note here too that users, data, passwords are not impacted in the upgrade. All right, so now that we've, go ahead, John.
One piece I would just like to add with some of the attendees that we have on the call, and Tanya, feel free to add some additional context here. There are always current plans as well for Acumatica that bring you into a regularly scheduled upgrade process, more of an automatic process. It still follows a similar flow here, but for those individuals, those clients, that could happen twice a year or just on an annual basis. So there is the always current license as well that helps you along this process, typically seen with clients that have less of a customized environment, perhaps less complexity in their custom processes. So just wanted to note that as well. Follows the same timeline for those that haven't yet gone through that first up.
All right, thank you, John. So with that, we'll move into some of the enhancements that we're going to see with the newest version in 24R1, starting with our generic inquiries. So in 24R1, you actually now use the results of a GI as a source to another GI that you are building. Additionally, within our generic inquiries, we can now natively calculate ratios and percentages. Next, we have some enhancements on the approval side of Acumatica. So when rejecting a transaction, you can now add a rejection reason to that. You're gonna see some enhancements to the multi-person approval process and the addition of approval maps for sales order invoices as well now. Okay. And we also have some enhancements on the business event side. And so we have some improved trigger condition mechanisms. We're now able to use formulas to build out those trigger conditions. Continuing on with our enhancements, we have some new abilities in the tasks in Acumatica. We're now able to link tasks to one another through that parent activity. This was not native prior to 24R1. Talk about access rights as well. So to start here, you'll see on the GI screen that there is a new dialog box for setting how that inquiry will display on your user interface. Additionally, what you'll see in 24R1 is your not set permissions have been removed from Acumatica. So what does this mean when we perform our upgrade? Well, if your access rights on a system object were set to not set for all the roles in Acumatica, then when you upgrade to 24R1, the rights will be converted to granted for those roles. If the access rights of any level on a system object for any role were, if there were access rights at any level for any role, then in 24R1, when you upgrade, those rights will be converted to revoked for those who were at not set. Additionally, we do have a new user interface. So I'm excited to get the demo and show you all what this user interface will look like in 24R1 and how to enable that as we go throughout the upgrade process. But before we jump into that exciting news, I have one last piece in the slideshow to go over, and then we'll take it into the live demo. So we have some enhancements in the manufacturing realm of the world here. So in prior versions, the automatic backward reporting was always turned on. In fact, it was not a setting you had available to you to toggle on and off. In 24R1, you are able to now toggle that off in your system, which allows you to process operation steps out of order when you're doing your production orders. This is helpful for companies that run operations in parallel with each other, where there's no real sequence between them. So you have that ability now when upgrading to 24R1. All right, so with that, I'm gonna switch over to sharing my Acumatica screen here. And we'll get into the live demo. We'll start with taking a look at that new user interface that I mentioned. All right, John, any issues from your end seeing my Acumatica screen?
Nope, all good on my side, Brady.
Perfect. So as you guys can see, I have a sales order transaction up, and I'm displaying it with the new user interface that you're able to toggle on and off in 24R1. So we do have the option to, in this version, maintain the old user interface or switch to take a look at this new UI. And so what you can see here is some grouping of your header level fields in a more modern and sleek approach to the screen. You'll also see some of the highlighting features for warnings, errors, statuses that exist. Gonna bring those to your attention a little bit easier. And so you can kind of get an overview of what this looks like from a transaction screen here in the new user interface. I also want to point out an additional feature with this. In your settings here on the screen, if I go into screen configuration, I have some more abilities to customize how the screen looks at a personal level. So I can bring in different fields to my header areas. I can just simply click the gearbox here. And similar to what you're used to seeing on maybe a column configuration level today, you're able to set this up at the header level and what fields you want to see. You're also able to add titles to those boxes. And so let's go ahead and change my title on that. We can apply that change here, and you'll see now that I have a title. You can go ahead and apply this. You have the option to apply it to everyone across the system or maintain their personal configuration and just apply this to myself. Now you'll see my title on my screen here. Additionally, like I mentioned, you can toggle this on and off. And so I can maintain the current user interface that I'm used to looking at by simply going into that gearbox again on the screen level and switching it back to the classic user interface.
A few comments that I want to make around the user interface, especially as it relates to 24R1. Tanya will probably receive questions around this. Because it is quite an overhaul to change the user interface in this degree, and we can see those more modern user-friendly components with conditional formatting, the ability to change the screens. It is a large project for Acumatica. In the current environment, it is advised to not have this in a production environment, but to allow, as you explore 24R1, that toggle approach. And so Brady will have that exposed under tools to be able to switch between the modern and the classic user interface. But again, in its current state, it is not yet advised to be pushed into a production environment. That will happen over the next few releases of Acumatica. Along in parallel with that, there's going to be a deprecation of the classic user interface. But understanding what this means for so many users, it is going to be a process that occurs over multiple versions of Acumatica. Tanya, is there anything to add from your perspective on that?
No, I think you addressed the question that was in the queue. Thank you.
Perfect. But again, it is always really exciting to see where the user interface enhancements are going and what we can expect in the future. But of course, in this stage, there's still areas that can be problematic at times, and that's going to be a part of this process over the next few versions to make sure that it is fully ready for production rollout.
All right, thank you for the details on that, John. Before I leave the new user interface, I also want to just point out that the new UI is also applied to your primary lists or generic inquiries as well. So let me just jump into my sales order primary list, which is also at this point in time set up with the new user interface. Not too much changing on this side. Like you can see a couple cosmetic changes from the primary list standpoint, but overall very similar to what you'd be used to seeing in the current user interface. All right, so moving on with the live demo, I want to point out a couple inventory features before I kick it off to John here. And so one new feature within the inventory and distribution module is for clients that do not have a manufacturing or MRP license, and you do have the distribution license, you now have a distribution resource planning module. And so in my inventory planning here, similar to what you would see in an MRP realm, we can now take advantage of that from a distribution level. So I'm going to go into my, open this up and go into my inventory planning display. For those of you that do have MRP or manufacturing, should be used to what this screen looks like. It's just going to operate in a little bit different world for our distribution clients. And so what you have is planning, demand, and forecasts for purchase orders, kit assemblies, and warehouse transfers as well. And so looking at my demand here through the various sources, and so through sales orders, through different forecasts as well in this site, and then it's prompting me to either perform a kit assembly in this case, create a purchase order, or as well you can see transfer from another warehouse if that's how you have your replenishment set up. So this is one new feature that our distribution clients will have available to them. Additionally, in our item classes, if I jump into one of our item classes here, all right, under our inventory planning, in the current version, you're able to set the replenishment class at a class level, at an item class level. Now you can set some of the parameters as well at the item class level to carry over onto your items when they are created. All right. With that, I will kick it off to John to demo some of the financials.
Right, let's go ahead. I'll share out my screen. And Brady, can you give me the confirmation when you're able to see it?
You're all good, John.
All right, perfect. All right, so there's been a few financial enhancements that I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to address today. So right now, you'll see that I'm starting off with an AP. I'm in the cash purchases side. Acumatica has released the ability to create cash returns against these cash purchases. So in the current form, I have one here all queued up, just a standard cash purchase. For those of you that have used quick checks in the past should be very familiar with this. And we are creating a consolidated AP process here, just recognizing the cash and the expense. This one has been coded for some of our demo services here today for $5,500. I'm going to go ahead and remove hold. I'm going to release this. After releasing, I'm going to toggle into the ellipses here. And you'll notice under the corrections, we have this ability to return. So again, the resulting entry here would be a return of cash and then an offset against that originating expense account. So I have that noted here as 81,000. For this cash return, I'm going to mark $500 of that original 5,500. A couple items to point out is that we have the new type of a cash return. This will also be helpful as we think through expense receipts, processing those for corporate cards. If we have refunds or returns against those cards, we can create negative expense receipts and we'll see the resulting cash return. Before I jump into that example though, I'm just going to go ahead and I've been through this enough times where I know I'm going to get a payment reference error. So before that appears on my screen, I'm going to populate that here to go ahead and release this cash purchase. If I go into my financial tab, you'll see, just as with any other area of Acumatica, those originating documents are going to be linked. So you'll see that reference here in 2344, and then you're going to see my GL batch. Now, I don't have the fancy user interface turned on here, as you can see that Brady did, but I'll still walk you through this in the classic user interface. I'll toggle back one so we can see the originating entry of that expense and the cash hit as well. If I toggle forward, this is a new GL batch that was created, offsetting that expense, and then debiting our cash account. So with that, I have opened up here as well an expense receipt. I'm going to go ahead and just toggle into this. Just going to do a quick refresh here, make sure that we're all set to process this expense receipt. I was recently at the Acumatica Summit to learn about these new features, and they are refunding me for $25. It was just one bottle of water, and we were in Vegas, so a little bit expensive. So they're refunding the corporate card here. I have that entered as a receipt against my hotel expense item. As I release this, I'm going to go ahead and claim it. And what we'll see for this negative $25 coming back against the corporate card, standard processing procedure here of expense receipt to our claim process. I'll submit it. One of the benefits to being on the demo side is I can also approve my own expense claims. So I'll go ahead and approve that. I'm going to go ahead and release it. As this gets released, we're going to see underneath the financial tab that cash return type that has been created. And we're going to see that offset appropriately here against my corporate credit card. So again, that new cash return type, really in the context of expense receipts, when we think through that process, can be beneficial for us. Right. One thing to also note in this, in my example, I did not have it, but this can also be leveraged within the 1099 side as well to make sure that we're tracking any 1099 NEC or miscellaneous values appropriately within the system. All right, and then also too, just going to tab in here, and we'll show that GL batch. So we've credited that travel amount, and we've received $25 back into our corporate card. All right. I'll go ahead and minimize those, and then next I want to go through a enhancement process within the receivable side. So to just get this started, I have our AR preferences up, and I just want to highlight a couple things here. I have the use credit terms and credit memos and the age credits. So some of the new functionality here allows us to take, say, an originating AR invoice, and we can now modify a memo to have specific credit terms that are perhaps 2% if paid within 10 days, at 30 from the original invoice. We can apply that to our credits. for more accurate aging and also more accurate cash flow analysis. So within receivables here, I'm just going to go into our invoices and memos screen. We also have provided some professional demo services, and I have an invoice here queued up and ready to rock. So a couple lines here for the $20,000 and $8,000 worth of services. You'll see the originating terms here of 3% if paid within 10 days, otherwise net 30. So with those options enabled on the preferences, I'll go ahead and release this. All right. As I toggle into my ellipses here, I'm going to create a reversal. And what you'll notice now is that I can modify those terms. Additionally, I can modify those due dates. So we can now track those credits, again, more accurately from an aging perspective. I'm going to just modify this down to be $10,000 here. Modify the adjustment that I'll make. I'll go ahead and save this. I'll release the credit memo. And then in the case of some of our credit memos, when we issue a refund, if we consider taking this further, I'll go ahead and process that refund. And since I meet those term dates, you're going to see a discount in that amount applied for a refund. So again, I had a $10,000, the 3% reduction there if paid within 10 days. So we'll see that value get dropped by the terms enforced now through that credit memo. So more flexibility around that, the credit memo side and the aging with any due dates that are applied against those credit memos. One real quick point as well, as we think about cash discounts, if I jump into my company's setup now, we have the option to have cash discounts applied, including taxes, so at a document level versus without. Historically, that had not been an option for the cash discount as it applies with the tax calculation. So I won't go through the full demo of calculating that amount, but I just wanted to point out that if I'm at a company level, you'll now notice this cash discount base, and I can select whether that happens at a document amount level or a document amount less taxes. So again, that's that same cash discount applied holistically against the document or without tax on the calculation. This had been limited in areas for specific entities, say a Canadian-based entity. There have been restrictions around this, and now we can leverage it at a company level. One thing that I wanted to highlight as well, just within the context of GL, is the approval map side. So I didn't want to have any challenges with the GL release, so I'm going to toggle into my preferences. Just make sure I have my GL approval map activated right now. And Brady, you touched on some of the aspects of the approval process and some of the enhancements here. So within the rule actions, I have one employee listed here, but I have the ability to select more employees. So really simplifying that process outside of just work groups. So we'll see that within the rule actions. One area to highlight, but then also too, our reason settings. So if I have a journal entry that I am, or if I think about an AP document, really any approval map required, or any document requiring an approval map, I can more clearly indicate reasons for approval and rejection. Right. So if I go into a new journal entry where I have this, we're going to just record a meal expense from the GL side. And I'm going to put this against, let's see here, other expense. I'm going to just default in 0 sub account. All right. In my transaction description, this is going to be for, we'll do Chipotle in Las Vegas. When we're there again for the summit, I'm going to record a payable against that. And let me input full amounts here. Again, I don't have the fancy user interface that Brady has. Go ahead and save this with an error in my sub account. I should have known. All right. If I remove the hold here, again, the benefit to being in the demo side is I can also approve and reject my own transactions. I'll go ahead and select reject, and I can enter a reason for that. So this is too costly for Chipotle. Please advise. That has now been indicated as a rejected transaction, and tracking it under the approval side, you're going to see that reason applied as well. So as somebody who sees those reasons, I can go ahead and correct my journal transaction and push that back through for approval. And you noticed as well, I have that same option for anything that I approve. Brady, anything to add there just from a approval map perspective?
No, I think you covered it all, John.
Perfect. So as I wrap up here within the financial side, I'm going to have Brady share back out the slide deck just to cover a few more points that we can expect as we get further down the road. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, Brady, and then if you wouldn't mind bringing up the slide deck again. We'll go to our additional financial features. All right. So there are a couple items that I would like to seed as we look forward to our next webinars. So in Acumatica for 24R1, they've released this netting AR and AP balances. So if we think about the concept of a business account where we can have customers and vendors extended, it's been highly sought after to make sure that we can bring these business accounts together to offset the balances. So if we have somebody that we're refunding on the vendor side or issuing any sort of credits for, we can see that offset appropriately against, say, their customer account. And Brady, I think we momentarily lost you. You're back though, and we can see
I'm back. Yep.
Slide. With that being said, this is currently available through a customization. So not native functionality right out of the gate. It's a customization that's available within the community. And just to seed our next webinar, as we get deeper into some of the CRM components and address the business account, we're going to go through this customization to see the processing and offsetting process between AP and AR for that holistic business account. Additionally, some other enhancements that have been addressed on the payroll side largely relate to the PTO process. As we look for our webinars in the future, we will be slotting one specifically around payroll, and we'll dive deeper into this type of functionality. But for those that are currently leveraging payroll, we have some additional changes within the PTO process. We can tier our PTO based off of years of service, and that's what that screenshot represents, is setting that different structure up for our PTO banks. We can roll over PTO for employees based on either an anniversary date or a specific calendar date based off our PTO calendar and our PTO policy. We have the ability to enable a probationary period. And overall, just around the PTO adjustments, there have been changes to make that process simpler. And then lastly, when we think about the employee side of it, as an employee using Acumatica payroll, I would now have visibility into my year-to-date PTO balance. So a lot of the payroll enhancements are around this PTO concept, and we'll get deeper into that in a future webinar. So with that, I think Kaylee, believe you're up for some CRM function.
Yes, thank you. All right. And can you just confirm you can see my screen all right?
All set on my side.
Perfect. So we have some CRM enhancements primarily on the case management side. So I just have some cases queued up here. Before I get into those, we will walk into some changes just on the case classes. So I'll pop into that in a new tab. So there's been a couple enhancements primarily on the work calendar side and then on the commitment side as well. So in 24R1, Acumatica has a new commitments tab with greater sophistication around just those high, low, and medium resolutions and additional target response times associated with that. So with those different severities, you can have activities counting against those. So as activities are created on the case itself, those can count towards those resolution times and those response times. So here I have the option to add that the case can be provided a solution through activities, as well as on this attributes tab, we can have those set up as well. On the work calendar itself, I'll just pop into there quickly. We'll see a bit easier in terms of setting those work schedules and work calendars, and we can now take into account break times and exceptions rather efficiently. So you'll notice I set those start and end times as well as break times, and those will count towards the commitments. So for example, if I have a commitment that I need a resolution for a support case within 5 days, it's going to take into account my weekends, and that due date will account for that. So we'll go back to a case and just see an example in action here. So here we have USA Bartending School reaching out to us because they want to upgrade to 24R1. So they asked, hello, I was unable to locate the release notes. Could you please resend these? So we'll see they have the medium severity on there. I'll click down into the CRM info, and here we can see those commitments. So those are based again on the severity and those times I have set up on the case class. So the initial response is due on the 24th at a certain time, with additional responses and resolutions to follow, again, based on those timings I have set up on the class. If I go ahead and change that severity, we'll notice that those times for responses and resolutions change as well. Next, I'll go ahead and add some activities. I'll send an email. We will resend those release notes. Again, those can be found in the Acumatica community if you too need some of those. We will save that, send that out, and then I'll just add a note here to say we resent those. Perfect. And when I go back to the CRM info tab, you can see those commitments reducing and they're no longer due because I had those activities going against those. And I probably should have opened this up to begin with, but I didn't. So there we go. So that case is now ready and resolved. Let's say I got response that they are done, they fixed it, they're all set, they have everything they need. I can close that case out. And one last feature of 24R1 on the case management side, as I close those cases, I can now add closure notes. So they just have that as record for their previous cases. And they're kicking off their upgrade process next week. So all resolved on that end. So that's kind of a look at some of those case management features and enhancements of 24R1. I will stop sharing my screen here. And I think we'll go back to Brady to share out his screen, and we have some additional enhancements on the integration side as well.
All right, Kelly, can you confirm you're seeing the presentation again?
I can, yes.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and jump into our first integration.
Perfect. So just a couple enhancements on the Avalara tax integration. So there's greater sophistication around that exempt customers. So in 24R1, users of Acumatica can view and manage tax exempt certifications that are associated with customers in Avalara. So now users can request and retrieve those certifications for customers through Acumatica. And then they can create customers from Acumatica into Avalara with just one click. So pretty quick, slick integration there. The next is just some enhancements to shipping carriers. So 3G PaceJet is now available as a native integration in Acumatica Core. Some FedEx and UPS enhancements. you now have the ability to connect sandbox accounts within the same tenant for testing. So again, makes that testing process easier for testing those integrations. And then Ship Engine is now including Amazon buy labels within their integration as well. And that leads a bit to the next integration, which is pretty exciting. So we have enhancements around the Amazon integration. The Amazon integration is available in 24R1. So that's connecting to those Amazon Buyer Central accounts that merchants have and linking different entities. So what you'd expect in any kind of commerce integration, the linking of products, product availability, orders, payments, prices, etc. And then in 24R1, there's also the integration between those orders that are fulfilled by Amazon. So you have those records within Acumatica, and then additionally non-order Amazon fees. So a lot of merchants in Amazon will get those non-order related fees, for example, for storage or advertising, whatever the case may be. So you can now import those into Acumatica as well to have that as records. So pretty exciting stuff on the integration piece. So with that, that's going to wrap up our session today. It looks like we may have monitored that chat pretty well. Tanya, any lasting questions within that chat?
No lasting questions, but to clarify on the release schedule, we typically see the R1 release for a given year in the third week of March or through the first week of April, sometime released in that time frame. And the same for R2. It's usually released around the third week of September, going into the first week of October. So that's the cadence for those two releases.
Perfect. All right. And feel free to drop any last minute questions into the chat and we'll try to address those as well. Just going over some resources and next steps here. So like we talked about a bit throughout the presentation today, there's product ideas. So if you have any ideas that you want to see in future releases of Acumatica, you can go ahead and put those in the community and they actually take those into account with each new release that comes out. Also located within the Acumatica community are those 24R1 release notes. So you can be sure to find those there. Again, it's a pretty long list of release notes. And so that's where SVA Consulting comes in and kind of does those tailored training sessions for you. So we won't make you read through all 200 pages of those. Next steps, if you want to upgrade, reach out to us. You're available to reach out to anyone on this call or reach out to the tech support email directly at sva.com. And then next webinar, we have a monthly cadence of webinars. So our next one is May 15th. And John talked about this a bit, but that will be around the CRM topic. And you can actually scan that QR code right there to sign up today. All right. With that, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you in our webinar next month.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.